Welcome to the Hidden Why podcast, episode 1063, my interview with Dr. Timothy Shaw, discussing great philosophical problems. Enjoy. Hey Tim, welcome to the Hidden Why podcast. Great to have you here today.
That's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Lee.
For those that aren't watching this on YouTube and listening to the podcast, maybe jump over to YouTube. Tim just showed me around his office there. He's got a ThinkTank office, which is quite creative.
Thank you.
Tell us about that space. I mean, why?
It's an old abandoned bar, in fact. It's
Whereabouts?
It's in Potts Point in Sydney, and it's got a heap of art in it, which Lee, let me restart. I don't really want to talk about the space. I prefer not to talk because I also live here as well.
Yeah. So you've got a think tank.
I do.
Tell me, what's a think tank and what's your think tank all about?
Okay. Look, a think tank, I guess it's a collection of ideas which I guess bubble and boil around for a long time and come up with some definition which can inform something that's happening around us or inside us. So I guess for the past little while, there has been a dearth of really good definitional knowledge in this field of moral injury. And this think tank, I've started it's been running for a little while, and it's been concerned with all sorts of things. It's got great philosophical problems. So you've got
That's the name of the think tank, Great Philosophical Problems.
It used to have 1 million people in it, in fact.
Really?
Well, it had when it was through Facebook, but now it's sort of transformed, morphed into a different beast, and it's a think tank specifically looking towards these understandings of meaning in society, these understandings of how justice is attached to that meaning, and how the psyche understands that in terms of morally injurious events and understandings.
Okay. It's a bit of philosophic thought behind meaning in life generally, or are you focusing on, I know you talk about PTSD and veterans and helping people with suicide as well?
Look, no, of course. So with ideas that like moral injury or PTSD, just like PTSD before it, moral injury, while it is, or at least started off in the veteran community as a way to describe wartime trauma, those understandings are slowly becoming seeping into the social lexicon, and you'll see moral injury after COVID or ideas of this nature, and understanding where those ideas come from, how they're enunciated. So if moral injury is understood in terms of a religious sense. So the church has its own ideas of what constitutes a moral injury, but how do we understand moral injury perhaps in the time where the church is losing at least its listenership or its viewership, or the people that turn up on Sundays, and what that means, or how even what's called the death of God, which is a construct, an idea of what's happened in first world Western countries, and how that plays out into understandings of moral injury, and how can you even talk about moral injury in the time of the death of God?
What is moral injury? Let's go there first. Explain that for me so I can understand that better.
Yeah, no, of course. So there's a few definitions of moral injury that are flying about. The first definition that was proposed was by Jonathan Shea, who is a psychiatrist operating out of America, and he defines moral injury as being let down by a person of authority, and it's a very culturally relevant definition. The second definition is by a group of scientists headed up by Brett Litz, and it's more of a perpetrative based definition. So acts that you commit or omit, where your agency is seen as something that perhaps is important for the definition. The church at the moment is pulling together their own understanding surrounding moral injury, and there's a fabulous new centre that's been established, the Centre for International Studies, the International Study for Moral Injury, and that is a way in which moral injury is to be explained to the priesthood or to the clergy, and how these new understandings can be understood by such persons.
Okay. It's confusing me.
Let me tell you what my definition is, and it's not really my definition. It's Friedrich Nietzsche's definition, which was the the way in which to come to this definition. It's quite difficult to do, because you have to understand, if we now live in a time of humanity and crimes against humanity, where if you saw a God walking down the street and he said, let's kill those people in the suburb next door to us, let's kill every third born, you could charge that God or those ideas with crimes against humanity, but you couldn't charge humanity these days with crimes against God, because after World War II, the Nuremberg trials established and invented these new dictums of thought and moral gravitas, where the worst criminals in the world that had ever been weren't charged with crimes against God, right? They were charged with crimes against humanity. And in so doing, by charging the orchestrators of the Holocaust, or the Shoah, by charging them with crimes against humanity, humanity was placed at a lower level than religion. So, and this meant for the Jewish people, that was the end of the ancestral sin. Ancestral sin was no longer seen as something that could be blamed for what had happened to them. It was just, you couldn't, there was the death of original sin in a certain way for the Jewish people, and it ushered in a time, the time of humanity and crimes against it has ushered in a modernity for us, whereby we see steep declines in religion or religiosity in our societies. And this is because with these ideas or these dictums of humanity and crimes against them, these have come from the just war tradition, and the evolution of the just war tradition to this point has been trying to understand the virtues of Christianity, how to understand what is right and what is wrong. And so in the time of humanity and crimes against it for a Christian, there is less need to believe in Christ, as in even though that is the basis of Christian thought, and even atheistic thought in Western societies has a very Christian flavour to it. Maybe not in the ideas of God, but in the judgments or the revenges or the penalties which are applied to those who do not see the world in the same way as an atheist. And it's those hidden whys or hidden meanings that are the basis that Nietzsche starts to think about, and he starts to critique, and he critiques it, this idea throughout his whole life. But a very poignant example of this critique is in his masterwork called Thus Spake Zarathustra, where he says, you will see a future projection of Christian psyches. He says they will be like kine, which is an emaciated cattle, and the kine in the future will be clustered around a preacher on the mount. And this preacher on the mount, because the second coming is not available, or no one believes in a second coming anymore, the preacher in the mount represents Buddha or Eastern religions, where instead of waiting for the second coming, the Christian psyche is really looking for release with that first lightning of ego death. And so that to understand what moral injury is in the time of humanity and crimes against it, all these ideas sort of wrap in and tie together, and I'll tell you. So moral injury is the suffering for meaning of a will to truth that has become conscious of itself as a problem in us. And I know it's a little bit of to get your head around, but if you'd like, I can walk you through how this definition has come into existence through the works of Friedrich Nietzsche, and how those works are then informed by the times in which we live, which is humanity and crimes against humanity rather than God and crimes against God.
Why would there be crimes? I mean, you have to be a believer in God to have crimes against God to begin with,
True.
Wouldn't you?
Yes, definitely. But if we understand moral injury as coming at the end of a Christian tradition that has been in existence for 2,000 years, because in the end, the definition of moral injury, it has emerged right at the very end. Right.
What in society now, is there lots of people with moral injury, or?
Well, the definition has only been proposed for 30 years. And while people are saying, well, moral injury happens, it's a constant, the explicit defining and creating a construct of moral injury is certainly historically significant, and it coincides with new ideas or the most pillaged piece of prose in the English canon is a poem by W.B. Yeats called Slouching Towards Bethlehem. And it talks about what are these new understandings that are coming to inform our psyches. It has been, it's the most pillaged bit of prose. So that metaphor is something that is so formative to what we are looking for. Some not really the division between good and bad, but a transvaluation of what good means, and a transvaluation of good. So sort of beyond. This is the basis of beyond good and evil for what Nietzsche writes about.
Well, we talk about moral injury just to try and summarize it a little bit better from my head. I mean, are we looking at it and going, well, we've had this this loss of meaning in the world because of the loss in faith, potentially multiple faiths, whatever it might be, and therefore we suffer because there is a loss of direction towards that meaning?
Well, no one suffers if the meaning isn't if there's no shock to meaning. Okay, so and it's not really meaning. It's if your suffering has meaning, there is no moral injury. So it doesn't really matter what happens to you. If you can find meaning, or if there is meaning into your suffering, then you are not morally injured. But for example, if you're suffering for meaning, or if you're suffering for justice, so there's no justice to your suffering, that and the way in which you are suffering for your justice or for your meaning is through the Christian way of understanding the search for justice or the search for meaning, which is a will to truth. And that will to truth becomes conscious of itself as a problem in us when we get to the end and we think, well, hang on a second, if we keep following truth down this rabbit hole, we must end up at faith, or in the very end, because you can never, it's almost a null hypothesis. You can't ever prove something's true. You can only prove something is false.
So if there is no justice in your suffering, then you could be described as experiencing moral injury.
Correct. So if you can't find, I've been.
But there's a lot of suffering without justice, wouldn't there be?
Well, yes, but for example, if you were suffering without justice in the Christian tradition, a few hundred years ago, maybe 1,000 years ago, doesn't really matter. You would go and say, I'm suffering, and they would say, well, you know what? That's because you did something wrong, or God's punishing you. And that punishment, or that idea of punishment, which would always throw the meaning of suffering back onto yourself, would be that meaning. And that's what Nietzsche understands as the ascetic ideal.
Okay. So
and so you will
it's kind of like
always find
scapegoating, really, isn't it? If you're
well, that's the origin of scapegoating.
Is it?
Well, a scapegoat was in the desert when the Jewish people were going through the desert. They would put the sins or put the transgressions onto a ceremonial goat and allow it to escape into the desert, the scapegoat,
right.
and that would take away the sins or expiate one's soul.
Yeah, I watched a movie the other night, and it was a totally off subject movie, but they were talking about, it was very Christian oriented, and the sins, and the father would say, well, it's obviously because we've sinned and we've done something wrong, so we have to pray and repent for that. Yes. So that was them basically finding justice in their
correct,
in their suffering.
And that's the very thing that Nietzsche is absolutely fundamentally against. He says if we are to have a more joyous, so his moral injury started off when he came back from war, and he went to war as a medic.
Yeah,
his first book was called The Birth of Tragedy, and then he went to The Joyous Wisdom. And the transition from the birth of tragedy, where the hero takes on these, I must do better, that is in the end that he wants to transvaluate the idea of a hero instead and away from those heavy burdens, and to take it into a joyous wisdom in a non-culpable way, because you don't want to be dropping off all these ideas and all these so for example, how do you in an ethical or moral way do that? And that's what he's describing in his book Thus Spake Zarathustra.
None of them which I've read, but
look, I haven't
obviously
read them
well rehearsed in it. So he's sort of arguing that you can't have suffering without justice.
He's saying that if you do suffer without justice, and if you are, I've spoken to some young people, and they believe that there is no justice in the world. They believe that you can't speak to power, that very crucial issues to them aren't being taken into consideration, whether it's the environment or what have you. And in that injustice, that's where they find moral injury, because they can't find meaning for it, and it creates a very savage mentality where there's despondency, or there's understandings of nihilistic behavior or just nihilistic psychologies. And those are the things that we're starting to see emerge in our societies today. Yeah.
Right. Do you think it's just because young people are too impatient and we want everything now and we can't be bothered to just persevere? No?
No, I don't think so. I think that they have been born in a very particular time, and very particular time without the buttresses that religiosity and its effect on our societies has given to previous generations, and without the meaning of great historical events that have flown through to them. So, for example, what is the meaning of the Holocaust? Is it the establishment of a new state, or is it the establishment of new ideas that flush through the world, of humanitarian ideas, so the ideas of humanity and crimes against it, or is it a state? And we're seeing this strange dichotomy where you see Israel itself being charged or accused of crimes against humanity for the settlements that they are building on occupied territory. And even at this point, for example, our government in Australia, my government in Australia, there is a veto on the International Criminal Court by our country to start investigating or start to really look at this subject. And I think that these ideas, when they clash so vigorously, it makes it very difficult for any strong or clear meaning to travel down to future generations or younger generations, and we see this as well in the nuclear bomb. So that was at the end of World War II. And America, we're really lucky that America used that nuclear bomb because they used it at the end of total war. So the barrier for use of nuclear weapons is, wow, we're using them at the end of when the whole world was in rubble. And if nothing else, that is what saved their future use. But in the end, because America never put their hand up and said, even though we've built a bomb that can only be used against civilians because it is non-discriminatory, we are not going to label this weaponry something as a crime against humanity, which of course it is. But rather we will understand it as our prerogative to use, and we will always have it in use as a possible first strike capability. And those understandings become very deleterious to the psyches and understandings of future generations as well. And those are the very understandings which will see their future use and not prevent it.
Right. So a lot of this meaning that's being lost in the world through the loss of religion and that sort of thing, is that where we can see that young people feel they don't have justice? I mean, going back to a simpler point of, hey, my voice isn't being heard about, climate issues. But wouldn't we just then say, well, yeah, I get they don't have any resources to pull on to give them some sort of justice, so they feel a lacking of justice. But couldn't we then look at the older generations that were very much a part of this and say, well, that's where they've come from, but and you've got to look at it from their perspective.
Well, I think what resources, I'm not too sure what resources you mean, but there are a lot of resources in the world to start to engage with these ideas. And the engagement of these ideas, it's not something that you will be able to turn away from and get away from it. It's because there is, after World War II, there is, and it is invisible, but there is this huge force, this huge humanitarian push or force that has come from the I guess you'd call it the guilt or the Christian guilt complex, which has said, we are going to start putting our resources into humanitarian institutions. And these have been the fastest growing institutions. When you think about, they came really from nothing. And now we have the United Nations, and now we have vast international food distribution ideas. And this network is only going to become stronger. And it is a network in which meaning, you can really understand meaning in, because it's starting to look towards to satiate, even if there is no God, at least you can look after humans and do or the environment or this or that. But in the end, the looking after the humans, that should be the most central peg in all of this.
So we're creating new organisations or groups of people to help with the social level of meaning. Maybe.
Well, look, it's even more than that. Like these ideas, they have now, that something is powerful because it wants to change things that are he wants to retrospectively change things that go back in time. Now, the ideas of genocide have now been applied retrospectively to the creation of the law. You look at the Armenian genocide. Now, Turkey's very unhappy about that, but we're saying that these meaning or these ideas that are surrounded in genocide and crimes against humanity, they have always been there, and we should and we must, or we need to look back through history with these tinted glasses on, and you see that is something that very, very rarely emerges. And the emergence of that is something that is a profound change that is also reflected in the change of base catechisms of the Catholic Church, where you'll see in 2018, the Church said, hang on a second, capital punishment is in all cases wrong. In fact, we can never morally justify capital punishment. And the way that they have got around that catechismal change is to say, well, societies weren't ready for this idea.
Sounds like a cat.
It's my ringtone. Societies weren't ready for this idea, but they're saying that if we now no longer have the moral prerogative to say that someone may be capitally punished, and not only that capital punishment or taking of one's life as a punishment is no longer at all able to be justified. And if you look around the world and you think, well, where are these ideas reflected? You'll see these ideas reflected in institutions that have been the spawn of the Nuremberg ideas, which, for example, are the International Criminal Court. And when you look at the International Criminal Court, you'll see the main driver of that court is Germany. And because the main drive of the International Criminal Court is not, they don't really care about the perpetrator of these crimes, and they don't even really, they care, but it's not the main aim is to build up a cohort or build up a literature on these and document, and it's more truth and reconciliation and healing. And these are the new understandings going forward that have been spawned from Nuremberg that are very important for the world to understand and get behind. And it's very important for powerful countries to sign up to the International Criminal Court.
Yeah. There's some depth in this, man.
What's
your think tank that you've created? Just tell us a little bit about that and where people can go to find out more about it and more about you.
Yes, it's Great Philosophical Problems think tank. We've got a website. It's Great Philosophical Problems, and you can find out a bit about me on the website.
So you just go to the website there, and you can sort of connect with you and find out more about it. Can they get involved?
You can get one of these lovely mugs. It's the think tank mug. It's the seal of the president changed instead of the seal of the president is the seal of humanity and crimes against it, and instead of the hawk, it's a dove. And I'll give a prize out to whoever has the best interpretation of the motto of the think tank. How about that?
That's good. All right, guys, check it out. The links will be in the show notes. Tim, thanks for coming on the show today.
Real pleasure. Thank you.
Until next time, guys. Peace, passion, and purpose. See you soon. Thanks, guys, for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. I hope you love what you're hearing. If you like this episode, guys, or any of the episodes that you're listening to here at The Hidden Why, please do me a favor by sharing it. You can share it with your families. You can share it with your loved ones. You can do that by using your favorite social media channels, using the icons on the platform that you're listening to The Hidden Why podcast. Also, guys, if you're a fan of the show, please connect with me. Connect with me at thehiddenwhy.com. I love to hear from you. I love to converse with the people that listen to this show to find out what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, and perhaps if they have any questions or feedback for the show as well. You can stay up to date with all that I'm releasing here, guys. I do a solo show every Monday, a 3-minute thought every Thursday. I do 2 interviews a week on a Wednesday and a Saturday, and a book review every Friday. You can stay up to date with all that by subscribing to my newsletter at thehiddenwhy.com. Just enter your email address there, and also subscribing to the podcast on the platform that you choose to listen to your podcasts. You can also support the show, guys, by using the Amazon links at thehiddenwhy.com. So if you like books, you can get all the books that I review there, and anything else really that you like to purchase through Amazon. So use that link, it helps support the show. And we've also got a deal with Audible, guys. Audible is a fantastic way to listen to all your favorite books. We've got a deal with them so you can get 2 free books when you subscribe to a 30-day free trial. So check that out again at thehiddenwhy.com. Guys, that's it from me. You know what to do. Go out there, breathe more passion into every single moment. Do everything with greater purpose, and in doing so you will discover your hidden why. This is The Hidden Why. My name is Lee Martinuzzi. Until next time, peace, passion and purpose. See you soon.